Okay, in this next hand we have 6-5 suited in the small. There's an open limp. Here decides to attack from the small blind to $2. So in this situation, I don't really love Hero's isolation. I find a lot of players isolate small pairs and suited connectors slightly incorrectly, especially out of position. And it's just one of those where if we isolate here, what do we expect to happen? Well, kick is probably going to fold, Xmas probably calls, we go heads up out of position, and we still have a pretty deep SPR considering it will be a single raise pop, but by the same token, out of position, it's going to be pretty difficult to play. Are we really going to have much fold equity if we're, say, just going for a lot of bluff C-bets? Then you can use stats if you have them, like his limp call pre-flop and his fold versus flop c-bet, those kind of things. But by the same token, I don't really love going for it without some good info. The hand just doesn't play particularly well, and also how are you going to play like weak junky pairs, which you're going to catch a decent amount of with a hand like this. So rather than go for the ISO, I usually like going for a complete here, get kick involved as well, and just go three-way to the flop in a massively deep SPR. As opposed to ISO, which I don't really think does too much other than just bloat the pot and make it extremely difficult. My opinion will certainly differ when I'm in position versus out of position, just based on post-flop flexibility, but I don't particularly love this spot at all. So Hero ends up getting the single call, not shocking, goes here, flops a gut shot, and Hero decides to fire. So as a pure default, if I am a preflop raiser and I pick up some sort of drawy type hand like this, I'm usually going to continue with it and just try to get him to fold out things like ace-9, jack-10, maybe pocket deuces or threes, something like that. So I do think we'll get some amount of folds. I don't think we're going to get a tremendous amount, but it's probably close-ish to that break-even considering that we're going to have some equity, and I'm certainly okay with that. End up getting called, jack on the turn, and Hero decides to go for the double barrel. So I love the fact that Hero's being aggressive. However, I think this is the wrong person and the wrong spot to get aggressive in. Simply put, Xmas did decide to open limp, and he open limp from the cutoff, similar to the previous hand where, again, someone who open limps from late position, I'm almost certainly going to assume is going to be an awful player. So if we assume that he's an awful player, why do we assume that he's going to be able to find a fold button? I'm not even convinced he'd be able to find the fold button with an 8 in this situation. And if he won't fold an 8, what's he really going to fold? And if he continues with a draw, well, all draws realistically are going to beat us, being that we have, 6 high. So it's the kind of situation where I don't really assume that a lot of good stuff is going to be happening here. I don't expect we're going to have enough fold equity here. We do have a glimmer of hope with our gut shot, but it's not like we even have like pair potential, like we could back into a 6 and have that win the pot. I just don't think that's going to happen enough of the time. So Hero's risking 6.5 here, and just based on a risk divided by risk plus reward to figure out the break even, we need this to work at least 36% of the time. A little bit less because we have some equity the times he continues, but we won't have a tremendous amount, and I don't really think that this is going to be good. I don't think we can generate enough folds to make this profitable, and I would much rather actually just check fold and be done with this. And a lot of players feel weird doing that with draws and even sometimes weaker draws like gut shots, but you don't have to play every single draw super aggressively. The reason why we can play draws aggressively is because of fold equity, meaning we're generating some percentage of folds. But against these kind of players, I really don't expect we're going to be able to generate a percentage of folds anywhere near enough for the time. So because of that, I'd really prefer Hero just say, okay, I took the ISO that failed, I took the C-bet that failed, let's just cut our losses here as opposed to start exploding those losses by a significant margin. So I would just check fold, Hero bets, gets called, 6 on the river, fills up the flush draw, check, faces a half pot bet, and now Hero is getting 2.9 to 1 on a call. So in this situation, we did back into a pair, which is cool, I guess, but by the same token, everything kind of filled up, and also all the King X, Jack X, whatever type hands still beat us. So if we look at Xmas's line real quick, he was super passive pre-flop, just called flop, just called turn, and then decides to bet the river when some stuff starts getting there. And it's not saying that he's never bluffing, but is he bluffing anywhere near enough the time? More than a quarter of the time, and I think that's kind of optimistic to say he would. I mean, that would have to be like a double float with ace 10, that sort of thing. And I can't see enough of his range being that. I mean, he may actually be betting an 8 because he just doesn't know how else to play it. And then we actually end up paying him off when we call here. So I just see heroes call on the river being extremely spewy, just really, really bad and really unnecessary. So all of this kind of boiled back to the flop and going, I'm sorry, back to pre-flop actually, and going for that original isolation. Again, I'm not saying that isolating is horrible here. I just prefer different hand types. Small pair suited connectors, I'm going to be very selective when I isolate from out of position. Otherwise, I don't hate just completing preflop, getting involved in that three-way pot and going from there, as opposed to ISO, especially if you don't have much idea on how you can bluff c-bet flops or how you can maybe go for doubles, and you're oftentimes not going to have that info against these kind of players. Again, I just don't necessarily see the reason to do it. And if you do go for the ISO, be very selective with your bluff and super thin semi-bluff double barrels, because I don't think you're going to be getting the folds you want to get enough of the time, and that's obviously what you're looking for, especially when you're going to be double barreling gut shots.